Has it been your dream to kill an elk with your bow? If that's the case, join us for this series, The Foundations of Elk Hunting. Hey guys, just like with humans, there's more being said with intensity and inflection than there is behind the actual notes that are being spoken by the elk. You know, if you go to a football game and you're watching the football game, you're watching your son out there playing, it would be really weird if you go out there and you just go, "Get them, boys, go get them, yay, go get them, yeah, go get after it." No, you're out there and you yell and you get after it, go Gage, go Chase, go. A lot difference, there's a lot to, even though the words were the same there's a lot of difference between the two, right? So with that said, what I see in a lot of elk hunting videos is you see the very last part of the call-in sequence. So you're seeing some cow calls and stuff that are in that excited state, and you never ever ever enter the woods just going into that excited state. You got to know that some people call it the temperature of the elk, or I would say the intensity level of the elk. Now there have been times, and it always baffles me when I do this, but I've walked into a little drainage and I couldn't hear the elk or something, and I walk in there, or maybe it's my footsteps. There was a herd going at it, and then my footsteps make them start up again, where their intensity level's way up here, and just by me walking in there, and I've created that intensity to start up again. And then you would come right into that with some hot calls. One time up in the Cascades, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But this is before I thought that you could actually hunt elk during the middle of the day. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was walking through this marshy spot. And as I was walking through there, I was clump, 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 clump. And a bull heard me walking through, and he bugled right at me. Being inexperienced back in those days, what I did is oh, an elk bugled at me, and I bugled right back at him, and it was within seconds he was on top of me. And that taught me something. That taught me that there's a level of intensity that each of these elk are at during the rut. So you got to know that going into it. So you always want to start with that low intensity. That's why I say these 3 calls are the main 3 calls that you need to know in your foundations for elk hunting. So your first call is the cow call, and you need to be able to use the cow call to create that intensity. And a lot of times with your cow calls, you'll create that intensity within a bull. If they smell the heat going on in the air, if there's cows coming into heat, the intensity's already up here, okay? But if it's that preseason stuff, when they know it's starting to happen, their antlers are getting hard, they've been rubbing, but they haven't got a cow into estrus yet, their intensity level is kind of down in here. But you'll get those 3.5-year-old bulls that will be out cruising around looking for cows. You know, they're at that age where they getting a little froggy. They think they should be able to breathe on their own, and but they're not big enough yet to dethrone the king. So they're out cruising around. They're, you know, the little 5 points that you see. This is a great time of year to use your cow calls from that, you know, the 1st of September clear up to about the 10th or so. It's a great time to use your cow call as the beginning of your calling sequence. I always started with a cow call at the beginning of our calling sequence. Now, we bugle throughout the whole year. from day one to the end of the season. But I've called in when they're not in that hot state yet. I've called in more pulls with my cow calls than you can shake a stick at. So that's the first thing that I want to teach you is, and it's a very basic call. It's just a simple cow call. That's all it is. Once you learn that, then you can build off of that with anything. With your diaphragm, it's the same type of note. Now this diaphragm call is a little bit higher than the open reed. This, by the way, is a prototype, born and raised, and this is a really cool tool because I'll show you why it's cool here in a second. But do the same thing with your reeds. Now you notice the pitch there, and the notes are a little bit different, but you notice the intensity and the inflection are the same. It's like, hey, I'm out here. I'm out and around, and guess what? I'm not by another bull. Somehow or another, I'm not with the big bull who's starting to collect cows because he knows they're going to go and heat in another week. Why don't you come over and say hi to me? That's what you're saying, okay? The things that go through your head when you're an elk hunter. So if you know that call, and so you go out and buy your kit, get these calls, practice that, because everything's a foundation here. So everything that we do elk-wise is foundational. So that's the foundational, that's where all the other calls build from, is just that basic call. Just now, once you learn that call, you could call even when they're in estrus, and even when the tension's getting, when the excitement level's getting up there, it's the same call. You just do it quicker. Carry out that bottom end. And what you're doing there is, you know, when you were a kid and you wanted a cookie, come on, please. That's all an estrus call is in the way that we do the estrus calls to a bull that's got cows that they're getting all wound up. That's how we do it. We just I want a cookie. Same thing with this call. So it's the same thing. It's all built from that foundational note though. So once you get that foundational note down, you could change it up and do whatever you want with it. One of the things that we do also is, and this is kind of an advanced trick that we do, in that is you pull your barrel off. So get you a call that you can pull the barrel off of, and that makes this louder. Now this is a locating call, so you're not having to throw a bunch of locating bugles out. We throw a lot of bugles out, so but there's times when we're like, man, we've been bugling all day, we haven't got any kind of response. Maybe we should just start trying to locate with a cow call. So by pulling the barrel off, you've just made a louder call, and it's a great locating call. Another thing that you can do is you can put it in your bugle, and then you got a really loud locating cow call. So that's the first sound that you need to be able to make for your foundational elk hunt. You could do this now. Get some calls. Go over to bornandraisedoutdoors.com, get some calls, and start practicing. This is the biggest thing that you could do right now for your elk hunting. So the next foundational call that you need to know is the locating bugle. Now the bulls will do this to let each other know where they're at. One thing you got to understand about elk or bull elk is they're lovers, not fighters. So if you step into a bunch of elk and they're all bugling and they're after each other, understand that that's all a product of the intensity level that started way down here and it's been brought up here. And what happens is when a cow comes into heat, that intensity level starts driving up. So when I'm trying to find a herd of elk, I send out what we call locating bugles. And you want a big, long, high, loud bugle. That's why this bugle tube is so cool. This is a prototype from Born and Raised, and it's aluminum. So it's I think they told me it's like 10% louder. Now this is a prototype. There's some things they're going to change on it, but this is a great bugle tube for those big, long, drawn-out locators. Now you notice I didn't put any chuckles on the end. I didn't growl into it. I didn't do anything that would say that I'm actually trying to steal your cows. All I said is, hey, where in the world are you? And you notice the inflection and the intensity wasn't there. I was almost like I was just like, just got done eating some grass and was like, hey, I wonder who's over there. And you just, I mean, you guys, if you think this in your head when you're doing this, and you start thinking like elk when you're calling, it will help your calling sequences so much. You're like, hey man, I'm over here. Where are you at? And that's all it is. That's the locating bugle. That's the one that you're going to grow sick of. Sick and tired of that bugle. We blow that bugle. Most years we're wearing out 5 calls at least. So that's the locator call. You could use any one of the diaphragm calls for that. I would suggest, when you're first starting out, I would suggest getting the middle of the line. That would be the bro yellow call. That's probably the easiest call in their line to blow, but it's hard to say because everybody's mouth is different. So you could get the pro pack and then mess with all the different calls. And if you want to see how to use these calls and the big differences in them, you can check out our Patreon video. We have an advanced calling sequence in our on our Patreon page, and you can go over and check that out. Okay, so the third foundational call that you need to know. So once you've got that bull to answer, once you've kind of jacked him up with some of them cow calls, and that you're raising that intensity level up, you know, he's starting to answer you back. You gave him that locator call. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll give him a locator bugle. If they answer me on that locating bugle, then I'll give them some cow calls, because I want them to think, oh, hey, there's a bull over there with some cows. And what that does is that triggers in that bull's mind, hey, there's more going on here than just another bull coming in trying to steal my cows. Now maybe I could get a hold of his cows. I always follow up bugles with cow calls. I always do. I always have my cow call sitting next to me, or I'll use my diaphragm. I really like the open reeds though. They just sound so much more like a cow to me than my cow calls coming off the diaphragm. So, but I'll just give them, you know, I'll give them a quick, just let them know, hey, I'm over here and I got cows. Because, you know, they're thinking, man, it's in the bull to breed as many cows as he can, to pass that genetics on. You know, the creator gave that to him. He created that in him to pass diversity of genes. So we use that, right? We use that against him. So we let him know, hey, and we give that intensity. Now, if depending on how the bull answers us, if he just answers us with the then what I like to do is I shut up right then and there, and I get in closer. Once I get in closer, I'll give him another locate bugle, and usually that will bring back a bugle to me. That usually tell me what he's thinking. If I get in closer, I just go, and you guys, I make so much noise going to it. Check out this clip. Okay, I make so much noise going into him after I've got him that he knows that I'm there, for one, and he's trying to figure out why I'm coming to him. You know, if I'm like that 3.5-year-old bull that's coming in and trying to get his cows. Or the one thing that I like to do is I like to come in, give him another locator. But I'll leave it a little bit slower and cut it off a little bit, and then I'll give him a cow call to follow it. And if I do that, and if he picks me up and he answers me right then and there, then I give him this next foundational call, and this is the challenge bugle. You can hear the difference in inflection and intensity, can't you? We actually were calling to this big old monster bull out in this middle of the prairie, and we couldn't hunt them. They were on private land, but we were watching. You know, it's kind of cool to sit there and watch. We were calling at him, and he didn't know that we were that we were humans up there. We're calling at him, and then we'd watch him in our binoculars, and he was just like loping around and goofing off, and we actually got him to where we sent out one of those bugles. And he almost laid his ears back, and you could kind of see him like, what in the heck? And when he did that, he looked over, and there's this poor spike, and I feel bad about it, but there's this poor spike in with the cows, and he looks at that spike, and he bolts over there and whacks him. So, you guys, this inflection and intensity is really what drives them. So now, those are the 3 foundations. Now you use those 3 foundations together, right? Once I've turned up the heat, I never go back to a locator. Never ever go back to a locator, because that usually shows that I'm showing that I'm a lesser bull. I just keep the heat on him. So I'll go back in after him. If he answers me back with a challenge, I'll answer him back with a challenge. The minute I hear him pipe off, I'll cut him off. And then I just keep bringing that inflection and that heat up. And if he follows me up, you will get him to come in. So those are the foundations of elk calling. Like I said, if you want to see an advanced version of what we do and how we do it, go to this video. It'll be in our Patreon, and you can go check that out. All right, until then, our next video is coming up, so subscribe. Make sure you subscribe, because our next video we're going to talk about how we actually find these bulls before we even step foot in the woods. How we use our scouting, all the mapping tools, and all that before we even step a foot in the woods. So subscribe below. All right, guys. Good luck. Hope you get out there. Hope you get some bulls this year.